Hi, everybody. It's S.J. Thomason with Christian-apologist.com, or you can also call me Psalm 23 Apologetics. Welcome. So today we're going to talk about the isms and which isms are good and which isms are not so good. So we've got a lot of isms that I would say are not so good. In fact, sometimes the word ism implies something that's not so good. And so we want to distinguish one of the isms a little bit first. And so first, we'll talk a little bit about communism and socialism. And then, of course, what Marx liked to call capitalism, which is essentially free market enterprises. And the big question is, are they good? Which system is the best system? And so I would say the evidence that we have from existing economies points to the fact that capitalism is very good. Now, it doesn't come without its detriments, of course, its drawbacks. There are certain drawbacks in a capitalist society, and those primarily include the fact that the wealthiest among us might become very greedy people and take advantage of people who are at lower levels. And so we do see some evidence of that, unfortunately. But we also see societies that everyone is thriving in general. You have a middle class that thrives. And so that's what differentiates us from communist or socialist regimes. So if you go into a socialist, so let's distinguish what these are. Communism and socialism essentially refer to the ownership of the means of production. Both of them relate to the ownership of the means of production. And in the traditional communist system, it's an authoritarian sort of ownership. And so it means that the government would own the means of production. And so the government takes over a lot of different industries where people are thriving and tries to run it themselves. Now, of course, this sort of system collapses. And we have plenty of evidence of its collapse in the USSR and in China and in North Korea and in Cuba right now where they're protesting. And of course, Venezuela. So Venezuela is run by an authoritarian dictator. And so previously it had been run by Hugo Chavez, who was exalting the notion that socialism is a good thing. He used to put the word socialism on bread that was sold and all kinds of products that were out there. And he would put that word on there to try to emphasize that that was his focus. However, what eventually happened was Hugo Chavez started to take over a number of different industries. So Hugo Chavez took over a shipping industry, took over tourism businesses. He took over businesses that were in oil, the one lucrative business that had previously led Venezuela to be the #1 most wealthy country in South America. He took over a whole bunch of businesses and put his own people in those businesses and drove them to the ground. Okay, so he installed thousands of his own people in the most profitable and productive business they had in oil and drove it to the ground because, of course, those people, these government workers, had no idea how to run it. And so we see the ugly underbelly of communism. Now, he calls it socialism. I would say that what he had was definitely an authoritarian version of socialism, if you call it socialism at all. There was no collective ownership of anything. And right now, over 90% of people in Venezuela are starving to death, while his heir is apparently worth billions. I believe she's worth a couple $2 billion. And so where did all the money go? Well, it got funneled up to the government. They decided they were going to take over. And of course, they took over and beat their ways into, beat everybody into submission. One of the things they did in Venezuela that you might not be aware of is they decided to require a buyback program for guns. Now get the thinking here. You get rid of the gun ownership for your people. You make sure that they're not armed. And then after you install these socialist system where you go in and start taking over a number of different businesses and essentially pushing people out onto the roads, what happens is if they want to fight back, they have no means of doing so. Then he sends a bunch of thugs into the streets to enforce his mechanisms. Okay, Maduro and Chavez prior to that. So we're seeing a lot of this stuff in Venezuela. This is what happens in socialist economies. Now, somebody's going to say, but what about, and this is the whataboutism, what about the Scandinavian countries? And they're going to say, well, those are great socialist examples. Well, let's speak to what this is. And I'm going to do an open microphone here. I'm going to allow you guys to come on in and chat about this. If you want to fight back a little bit on what I'm saying, I'm definitely going to welcome that. But I just wanted to get a few points out to lay the foundation to make sure we're all understanding what we're talking about here. And I also want to say hi to people in the chat right now, because I am watching the chat and I see my old friend who actually inspired me to start this YouTube channel in the first place. Philosophical Logic is in the audience. He says capitalism offers the best success opportunities for everyone. Parker, he is a comrade, okay? Parker calls himself Comrade Pinklace on Twitter, and I suspect it's because he likes the idea of communism, and we should go ahead and disabuse him of any notions that communism is a good system, because it is flawed. Again, 120 million people perished in the last century thanks to communism. Okay, communist ideals run under people like Lenin, Stalin, and USSR, run under people like Mao Zedong in China, where some of the most egregious massacres took place, and of course run under currently in places like North Korea and in Cuba. Okay, the Cubans are finally really starting to protest against this horrible system. Also, hi to Susan, and thank you so much. Good to see you in the audience. Yes, I have been reading The Naked Communist. What a coincidence. Just happens to be sitting next to me. I've been sharing this with all of my relatives, tell them they need to go read this book. I also see Mr. Phil Fox. He was on my channel before. And in fact, if you guys haven't had the chance to listen to the conversation that I had with Mr. Fox, you're going to want to do so. Now, Mr. Fox is a Native American, and his grandmother had spent some time in these awful boarding schools. So one of the things, I'm just going to quickly sidetrack with this really quickly, is just to make sure you get a feel for what Phil Fox and I were discussing. But Phil, he shared a lot of information about what happened in his grandmother's boarding school. And so what happened in these boarding schools, and this happened in the US and Canada, the government would want to re-educate people in the Native American population. And so they would sort of force them to send their kids to these boarding schools where they would require them to wear Western dress and force them to not speak their own native language. They had to only speak the local language, the English. And so people felt very demoralized. I mean, imagine this. I speak English, and I'm right now in a traditional American outfit. And if I were put into a boarding school and told to wear the traditional garb, say, of the Muslim faith, or something that's just totally different than I am, I would feel that my identity had been stolen in some way. And so Phil gave me a lot of information on some of the harsh treatment that Native Americans have endured over the past couple of centuries, particularly. But even though going all the way back until the 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, you've got a lot of really terrible things that we've done. Since Phil was on my channel, I also took a look at the treaties that the U.S. government gave to the Native Americans. And unfortunately, what happened was they broke them. They said, hey, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that, we're going to give you that land. A lot of times it was just broken. So they were really maltreated. And unfortunately, I don't think people know enough about this. And I don't think that they have enough voices out there. Now, Phil, of course, is making a big stir. And so are friends of his that he's mentioned on his channel before, and I'm forgetting his friend's name all of a sudden, unfortunately. But he's got a lot of people who've been writing books and saying things like that. So you should go out and take a look at that. But going back, and I want to say also hello to Carl Gettner. I don't believe I know Carl, but welcome, Susan. Welcome, Phil. Welcome, everybody who's in here. It's always great to see you. Oh, thank you, Phil. Thank you for correct. I couldn't remember the name. Mark Charles. So Mark Charles has written a book, and I started reading it, Unsettling Ideas. And it's has some very unsettling ideas about what happened to the Native population in the United States. And one of the things that they talk about is the doctrine of discovery and the way that that was proposed in Europe and brought forward into the United States, where people felt like if you discovered a land, then therefore you own the land. And they said that Christopher Columbus discovered America. But you know what? There were other people who had already discovered America living here at the time that people want to sort of squash that memory. There were people who had been living here at least going back to about 12,000 years BC. So we have to remember that there were some natives living here. Some estimates, I tried to find how many people were living here. Estimates vary quite a bit, but I've seen estimates into the millions. So millions of Native Americans were living here prior to the time when Columbus came to America in 1492. And so anyway, I've digressed a little bit, but I'm sure there's an ism I can put onto that. That actually reminds me of the individualism versus collectivism. Those are an extension of this whole idea, which I'm going to get into in just a moment. But I wanted to quickly tell you why the European system isn't what you think it is. And so if we talk about socialism in places such as Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, the version that they have requires, now you remember, these three countries are very small population-wise, okay? So they're teeny little countries. In fact, Norway only has about 5 million people. Sweden only has about 10 million people. Just so you can put a comparable to that, United States has 331 million people, including places like Florida that has about 21 million people. So if we want to say this another way, Norway is 1/4 the size of Florida. And Sweden's about half the size. So they're very small countries, and they have very homogenous societies. Again, very much unlike the United States. We're very heterogeneous here in the United States. And what they do is they have very, very high personal income taxes. So very high income tax rates. For example, if you're making 60 grand in these societies, you're going to be paying about 60% income tax. It's very high relative to what we pay here, for example, in the United States. And then we have the idea of value-added tax. So here in Florida, we pay about 6% sales tax. The value-added sales tax in those places is about 25%. So very, very high. So that money goes into cradle-to-grave sort of social systems. But the social systems give people free healthcare, which I, of course, love the idea of free healthcare. I think we all should have free healthcare. I think that'd be great, but it, of course, won't be free, and we'd have to figure out how to implement such systems. But the other thing is they say, well, we get free university education. Well, the difference is, of course, the government is going to only accept those who get accepted into the university. You have to have certain grades. Not everybody gets a free university education. And of course, the programs that you go into have to be approved by the government. They have to feel that they're useful. So underwater basket weaving and some other useless majors won't be advocated in those kind of places. And so that's just something to point out. So Limby Banda says an interesting opinion. Oh, canceled one is here too. Yeah, Christianity-ism. That is a good ism. Just to mention, okay, so there's something to distinguish here before I open up the mic here, but something to distinguish also between what they call collectivism and individualism. There was a person called Gert Hofstede, and in the late 1960s and early 70s, he was working for IBM. And he collected information from thousands of people working for IBM all over the world. And he found that he factor analyzed the statistics. He put it all together, which is basically a way of coming up with commonalities, common factors. And so he factor analyzed the statistics, and he came out with a number of different dimensions that helped to explain differences between people in society working for IBM. So there was a homogenous group in some way. All people were working at IBM. And so what he found was in certain places of the world, we've got very high levels of individualism. For example, the United States is the number one in individualism. In these high individualistic societies, it's higher levels of gross domestic product per person. You also see free markets, creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Lots of good things in highly individualist societies where individuals are given much value. Now, in the United States, we have this idea that we're supposed to value all lives, okay? So all lives we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Now, of course, as Phil has pointed out, that system has some flaws in it, because even our founding fathers didn't give everybody equal rights at the time when they implemented the system. However, we're working towards getting a better system. And so again, so that was a very individualist society. A lot of things like free markets, capitalism, those sorts of things come out of these kind of societies. Capitalism basically says that okay, see Jeff Williams. I don't know if this is the one Jeff Williams that I know in the chat, but hi, Jeff, Conrad, hi, St. Tommy. Good to see all you guys. St. Tommy always reminds us of something really important. The Lord Jesus Christ was crucified, buried, and rose from the dead on the third day for the forgiveness of sin equals the gospel of grace. Thank you. God bless. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to say before I open the mic, I'm about to put the link in here. If you guys want to join, feel free. Last thing I want to say is what collectivism is. So in China, they have very high levels of what they call in-group collectivism. That's why if you do business in China, you're really encouraged to try to work with the Chinese, because the networks are really important there. Relationships are very important, and something they call guanxi, which is a relationship networking sort of a system. And that's very important. So in-group collectivism means sort of necessitates look at the out-group as being rather inferior in some ways. Okay, you don't necessarily want to work with the out-group. That's why if you have a society with very high levels of in-group collectivism, where they have traditional stereotypical views of outsiders, then you might want to, if you want to again do business there, you're going to have to get in with those people to be considered part of the in-group. Now, and you go to the Swedish societies, you go to Northern Europe, and you're going to find that they have very high levels of what they call institutional collectivism. And in places with high levels of institutional collectivism, the government has very hefty welfare systems. And that's, again, what you see in place in Sweden and Denmark and Norway and those countries. And so in those kind of places, a lot of the people, you don't necessarily have to help the poor yourself. Okay, you don't necessarily have to have the churches or the charitable institutions or all these kind of places helping the poor, because people are taxed so high that a lot of money is funneled into programs to benefit lower income people. And so even middle income people are taxed very high in those kind of systems. And there's low levels of poverty. Of course, again, remember the size of the population is downright puny, but the system is very high levels of institutional collectivism, high welfare states, and people don't need to deal with the poor themselves because they've outsourced it to their government. That's the system. Okay, so anyway, we can talk about what you think about that, but I am pasting the link here if anyone wants to come in here and join me. So I've said a few things that I wanted to say. I'll also talk about, really quickly, while I'm waiting if anyone wants to come in and join me, we can also talk about things such as liberalism and conservatism. Okay, what is that? So the conservative view tends to be one that in the United States is less tolerant of change, less tolerant of strangers, outsiders, people like that. You also have a greater appreciation of patriotism, loyalty to the country, and a respect of authority. Okay, that's the traditional conservative view. And then, of course, we have the traditional liberal view. And the liberal view would say that now we have respect rather than respect for the authority. We're more, and this is not the traditional liberal view, but this is tends to be the liberal view that we see right now, is more desire for change, maybe an appreciation more for chaos over order. See more order in the conservative group. But anyway, so we got these two things to distinguish. I see that I've got Parker and Limby right now, so I'm going to go ahead and open this to these two. So Parker and Limby. Hello, Parker and Limby.
Hello.
How are both of you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Hello.
Good. I'll make sure your sound is okay, guys. So I think I heard Parker first.
Yeah.
Parker. Okay, you sound fine. And then Limby, your sound is all good?
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay, good. Yeah, I just wanted to double check. So hi, how are you two doing today? Is everything good? It's a Monday. If you're a Tampa Bay Lightning fan, right now you're watching the parade go down the water, through the water in Tampa Bay, which a lot of people are doing in my area, including my husband. he's watching it on TV. But if you're not Tampa Bay, then you're here on this channel. Maybe, I don't know. What do you guys follow ice hockey at all?
Not really.
No. Do you, Limby?
Not at all.
Not. But do you? Okay. So we'll get back to our topic of
Mississippi, and it's not really that popular.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I'm in Florida. I mean, who'd believe that we actually won ice hockey championship twice in a row? I mean, how does that even possible? We'd have no skating rinks except for indoors. And it's just, I grew up in Illinois where there were lots of skating rinks on our ponds, and it was perfectly fun to skate all winter long. I don't know how these guys, they must have grown up north, because, I mean, this is just crazy. So, okay. So let's talk about this.
Right. Makes sense.
So I see what other Jeff Williams is there? So I think that is the Jeff Williams that I know from Twitter. So hi, Jeff Williams on Twitter. Okay, so anyway, back to this. So let me just open it up to you two. Parker came in here. Parker was the first one to show up, and then Limby, you showed up right after him. So maybe we'll just go right in that order. For Parker, what's your opinion on, and maybe just in a nutshell, not too long, but maybe a couple minutes explanation of what do you think about the isms that I mentioned?
So yeah, I think there's as you mentioned earlier, you mentioned authoritarian communism, authoritarian socialism, and that's like not in general what most people are advocating. There's many views on how we should involve the state, and usually critiques of the state involves not into leading to dictatorships like in Cuba or anything like that. So there's no focus of power in a single individual, which is my whole stick, is like how you've tried to attribute that communism just purely authoritarianism, even though there's multiple views of libertarian thought, and there's many different branches, I would say.
Okay, that's fair. So I think so far you and I can agree that we don't like the authoritarian version of any of these political systems. Is that fair? Perfect. Yeah. So at least we have one agreement. So Limbri, what do you think?
Yeah. So, first I did come in late. So if you could fill me in on anything that I missed, but I was this wasn't the first time you brought this up, the kind of capitalism and liberalism and all this stuff. But kind of my critique is with capitalism is a lot of the rampant capitalism. I think I link to the kind of cultural degeneracy that the West has gone through, and I also think that it has. I think like a lot of the view tends to be forego the moral components. So I think it's done a lot to kind of tear the family apart. You now have you don't have as many single income households much anymore. People are getting paid less. There's also other moral components like fair treatment of workers, fair wages, and things like that. And so like obviously there's always a component of having innovation and like technology and in the internet and all the stuff we have. I think also like the moral component where I disagree with, I just don't think like it's as more neutral as you would think so.
Okay, that's fair. Now, I think both of you guys are bringing up some good points here, and I think I want to build off your point as well, is let's take a look at capitalism. We have to remember a few things about it. One is that we're allowing people to operate their own businesses, free from government interventions, except for, of course, your tax and your businesses and that sort of thing. But you have to remember in the United States, 89% of businesses have less than 20 employees. So the typical business in the United States is not this big, greedy capitalist Jeff Bezos type. The typical business is really the small ma and pa trying to make ends meet. And so I think you'd probably be fine with that kind of system, right? I mean, with ma and pa trying to make ends meet by running a sandwich shop or something. So I think
right.
I think what
Absolutely.
probably all of us.
And that's really my.
Good. Keep going. I'm sorry.
I was really zeroing in on the big corporate neoliberals overreach. We see that a lot of corporations are they spread liberalism all over the world, and I guess when you zero in on that, I should have been more specific, but good point. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. But I do want to point out, just to bolster your point a little bit, is there's a couple things. Even though 89% of the companies are run by small businesses, 57% of the workers here in the United States are working for larger businesses, medium to large businesses of many more employees than that. And so we have a lot of people working for the bigger businesses. Amazon and Walmart are among the biggest employers. And if you look at Amazon and you look at Jeff Bezos, the guy's sitting on $200 billion. And his wife, she has so much money, she's just starting to give it all away. It's ex-wife. So she's gave away $8 billion. I actually think that's great. She's giving stuff away, no strings attached. I think that seems like a pretty good thing. She's giving it to educational institutions. But to your point, they have an inordinate amount of influence over what we're doing. Like when you get social media that's directing conversations and restricting conversations based on whatever, say, like in Twitter, whatever what's the guy's name? Jack Dorsey wants us to think. There's sort of a mind manipulation going there from the upper echelons in the country. I think that's fair.
Right.
I had somebody on my channel called Miklos Lukas, and he's apparently the Jordan Peterson of South America, and he was talking about the World Economic Forum and what they call the Great Reset. And his ideas were that the very wealthy people are in the World Economic Forum. So it requires the poorest person there would have to come up with at least 60 grand a year to be a member. So it's super wealthy people. And they're coming up with this idea that they wanted to do this great reset of the economy to direct everything in the world towards a one world sort of system. Now, what would you guys say to that? Having a one world government instead of having all these little governments all over the world. Do you think it'd be a good system to have a one world system?
I would say it's not a bad idea, but I think the conspiracy behind there being a giant world government being formed, or there is one, is mostly a conservative conspiracy to undermine certain policies proposed by liberals and Democrats.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I got sidetracked a little bit. I'm reading the chat, and so you're saying it's more of a I mean, there is a fear. There are some people who are peddling conspiracy theories, and so we do have to be a little bit cognizant of that. There are some people who seem to like to, I mean, I've seen stuff on Twitter that's totally ridiculous, that people are pretending that, oh, the government's doing this and Big Brother's knocking on your door and all that kind of stuff. So to some extent, we have to watch out for that. But I think it's the idea of having control from a number of different people. But I just got logical, plausible, probable. I was trying to read this because he said, don't believe the hype. Cubans aren't protesting against dictatorship. No, they are protesting against vaccine shortage, not 60 years of communism. We are surrounded by total idiots. I did believe that Cubans were protesting against communism. I'm sorry. I guess I fell into the idiot pool today. Sorry. So I thought that's what that was about, the Cubans. So,
yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Limby.
To the point of, you were talking briefly about the one world government being in charge of the economy. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, that's something that people have proposed. They proposed having a one world society, and their big focus is on global climate change. And so they want to take over and be the climate czars and start demanding carbon tax, all kinds of different systems. And so it's a concern because it's interesting. It's almost like, go ahead. I'm sorry, Limby, say it again.
Wouldn't it be more just kind of a therapeutic, would it actually be a one world government in terms of actual substance, like having a legislative body or something like that, or having a currency, or having a military or anything like that? Or is it more of just a sort of like in the mind, or because of technology and the way we're connected in some way, shape, or form? Because I'm not really familiar with it in the strongest sense.
Yeah, well, the fear is if you for example, that's one of the reasons for Brexit. You guys have probably heard about why did Great Britain feel that they didn't want to remain in this European system? Okay, why did they break free? They're still kind of breaking free, but why did they decide to do that? And a lot of them is because they feel like that their individual voices weren't heard. And it kind of reminds me of if I'm a teacher working through the K through 12 school system, and that's one of the systems where unions have a very heavy representation of the teachers. And the reason why they do is because a lot of the teachers feel like their voices aren't heard because they're this little teacher at this one little school, and the whole system is run at the county level. And sometimes you feel like your voice as the individual in that kind of system isn't heard. And so the Brexit people who wanted to break away felt that they were within the system. They saw a lot of people coming in from outside the country, repopulating into their area. And their fear was that a lot of jobs were being taken away because of a lot of what they call outsiders coming in. And so a lot of the people in Brexit felt that way, and that's why they broke away. And that's the interesting thing is the EU model is sort of, if you take that and expand it all across the whole world, it would be Germany running the rest of the world. And I don't think anyone wants to have, sorry, Germans. I mean, I'm part German, but I could say this. Sorry, I don't want Germany running the world. That was just or China for that matter. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Is there one place we would actually want to have run the world? I don't think I want the United States running the world, to be honest. So is there any country leaders that would be well suited to run the world?
Yeah, I think Viktor Orban from Hungary would be a decent choice. His Hungarian government's been able to do some stuff with some family policy and things like that. and very pro-family, pro-Christian. Christian politics has been revived there, so maybe that would be a choice. But they're coming out of sort of a economic haze, and they're kind of dependent on the EU, not as much as the UK was, where they could break away. Right now, they're kind of independent, but that's somebody I would think of. But I don't see that happening. I don't see him having as much influence the same way, because I don't know if maybe you would disagree, but most conservatives or right wing tend to shy away from authoritarian tendencies, and so I don't know if it would actually mean much if somebody like him was in charge.
Yeah. So you're a Christian, Libby. I didn't realize that. I never know what people's position is when you come in. So it sounds like you're a Christian.
Yeah, 100%. I've been following your show for quite some time.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. No, I agree with you. Hungary, Poland, there are a few places that have made some moves forward from the Christian perspective. And I think a lot of us could unite under that sort of a system. I would love a system that's run by Christians who are real Christian, like Christians who want to be like Jesus, that kind of Christian. There's some Christians I don't think are trying to be like Jesus.
Right.
But that those kind of systems would be interesting. And so I think some of the policies that you say that are coming out of some of those kinds of places, for example, there's a little bit of pushback on this pro-choice abortion idea. And so sometimes
in Hungary recently, I think they got in trouble for banning the promotion of LGBT content to children and things. So they're currently under investigation. So they're pretty in your face about it, more so than your average U.S. politician. Whereas U.S. politician is more about religious freedom and kind of like a pluralistic worldview. It seems like they function and act like they're the majority.
Yeah, and you said something that I think is also that I want to build from, that you also mentioned with this whole system, is the family idea. So I think that I can get behind you, and I bet you Parker would get behind. I bet you we could all agree with this particular idea. It's an ideal situation if people are raised by two parents. I think that's an ideal situation, because the two parents, if one parent does have to go to work. And sometimes I think, going back to Limby's one point about people being very greedy and not paying very high wages, I think that's pretty awful. If you can afford, you've got good resources, if you can afford to pay your people well, because I think that speaks to this idea that in the old days, like the 1950s and 60s, traditionally the man went to work and the woman stayed home, and you could afford to live that way with one person working. And then in the 70s, we started hearing about latchkey kids and all that kind of stuff. And a lot of times it's both people going to work and the kids coming home to no parents. And so that can be a bit of a challenge sometimes. And then now things started getting a lot more expensive too, because in the old days, you didn't need to have multiple TVs and cars and all this kind of stuff, and internet connection and everything else, of cell phones. And we've got a lot, our expenses have also gone up, but I don't think our salaries in some cases have gone up to match our rising expenses. And also our tend to be very materialist. So,
right. Yeah, it's almost like the economy is now just engineered to allow you to pay for Netflix and maybe some TVs or some consumer goods, but nothing like buying a home is not much harder, much more expensive. Maintaining a car, college has also gone up, the cost of college. So maybe the more, like, you could say, important things, and they'll kind of just reduce to consuming, going out to eat, all the stuff, buying stuff, and doesn't really build a family. Yeah.
Well, I like the idea of buying a home too. And I can speak as a former realtor about buying a home and what's happened in Florida lately. And because I used to be a realtor down in Southeast Florida, and the real estate prices this last year, and I don't know if it's because people have just been fleeing places like New York, and it has been a lot of New Yorkers coming straight down to Boca Raton. That's where I lived for a long time. But the prices in Boca Raton have shot up to the moon for just a 3-2 house that, I'm not even kidding about this. Average, if you guys just look up the average prices of a 3-2, 2-car garage, or even 1-car garage home in East Boca, they've gone in the past, say, 5 years from about $450,000 maybe $400,000 to right now you're seeing about $800,000. How can anyone, I mean, how could a beginning family, or really, that's not affordable. That's a nut that's probably about $8,000 a month, including your mortgage, your interest, your taxes, and your expenses. And that's a huge nut.
And you're probably still stuck on student loans as well. And so you're still paying some of those other debts.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this as a university professor is, as far as student loans, one of the things that I'm talking about, I'm thinking even with my own kids, my kids will get, if they go to my school, they'll get free tuition, which I think is great. But the room and board is really expensive. And so I could let them just commute with me into school if I wanted to save money. But for traditional people, I would highly recommend in some cases, if instead of taking out these massive loans in some schools, and a lot of schools require massive loans to room, board, and everything else, is consider community college for a couple years. Go through, pay relatively low prices, and then after, in Florida, if you go to a community college and you get your associate's degree, after 2 years, you get automatic acceptance into any of our state universities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Great idea.
That's one way to save money, because I do know people, including one relative who's got over $200,000 in debt from, and I'll say it's New York University.
Oh
wait, was it New York? No, I'm sorry, it was Columbia University, and so she's
never
200. No, she can't. Well, the worst part is I shouldn't. I don't want to get in. What if she's watching? I really doubt she's watching, but if she were, I don't want to say what I want to say. So. But I mean, she's actually in. Okay, well, I'll just point it out. When you're choosing a college major, you really need to choose one that has some practical jobs connected to it. And so that's another thing. A lot of people go into these majors and they don't really check what the job prospects are. And then they graduate, accumulate massive debt, and realize that the jobs that they can get can't even begin to chip away at the debt that they've accumulated.
That's true. That's true.
So. Yeah, I'm just, let me just hit my volume here because I'm going to make sure I can hear you guys better. So yeah, welcome. I'm really glad both of you are here on my channel. Now, Parker and I interact a little bit on Twitter. And so, Limby, are you also on Twitter?
No, I got off. It's such a hellhole. I just need to, get away from it.
Smart, very smart man.
I've been for a while.
Very smart man. Okay, so Digital Gnosis says, I'm going to be spending $10,000 on my master's next year, but so far taken on zero debt through uni. That's awesome. I will point out, I earned an MBA degree years ago, and it cost me at a state university, and I footed the bill myself. That cost me $6,500, including books and everything. But that was in the late 90s when it was less expensive than it is today. It's gone up quite a bit. So yeah, shalom, kenami, all this stuff. And so I'll point that out. The other thing is the type of degree that you get, as I mentioned before, because, and I'll just say it, some of the social science degrees, the history degrees, the arts degrees, some of those degrees, even though they're wonderful in some ways, and I love the idea of being a creative writer, for example, and those sorts of things. But if you don't have some sort of an idea on what job you want, and you go into creative writing or you go into journalism, and you don't know what the job prospects are for being a journalist, you might be putting yourself in a bad position. And I can even say, even in some fields, like right now in the law fields, a lot of lawyers aren't making the bank like people think they are. And so I know lots of lawyers who are struggling actually to make ends meet. And so that's one challenge with being, it sounds like a traditionally great job, but it's a challenge for people today.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
So Limby, and I'll ask Parker, you can chime in here too, but I want to ask Limby, I want to ask you about your Christianity. Were you raised in a Christian family, or did you just sort of recently come to Christ, or how have you come to Christianity?
I'd say both. I come from Malawi, so it's a majority Christian country and very traditional and stuff. And so I went to church all the time.
Shoot, I think we lost a little bit of your connection here.
Until I came here, because the U.S. is like a different animal in terms of Christianity and stuff like that. But I think that was kind of more personal journey, I guess, that, everybody always tell you have to get to a point where you make it your own, not just like a family heritage thing, which isn't bad per se, but you have to put in your own work, I guess, and have your own identity in Christ and personal relationship. So that happened about 4 years ago in college, and so that's where I've been so far.
Yeah, well, that's great. So, and I'm glad you came over here. That's wonderful. And so I think you're right, though, because I think a lot of people, they're say if you're raised in a Christian family, like I was here in the United States. I remember when I was in my later teens, and well, especially in my 20s, I started questioning things, and I started thinking to myself, why am I believing Christianity? Is it just because my parents did? And am I just using the default? And I thought Christianity was sort of a boring default even. I thought there must be more adventurous, like exotic faiths out there. So I started looking at all these Eastern faiths and this weird spiritual stuff and these weird crystals. And I started doing looking into all that stuff, thinking it was so much fancier. And then I had experiences. I started having spiritual experiences with Jesus, realizing, wait a second, you're completely wrong here. Jesus is the reason. And it's actually, Christianity offers a much better explanation of our origins, our meaning, our morality, our destiny than all of these other faiths. They don't explain, like pantheism. It doesn't explain how can the universe have a beginning.
Beginning and end, yeah. And that's a good point, because I think that problem of just kind of non-intellectualism is really bad in Malawi, because what you end up having is like you have people that are more educated, so they're less likely to take things just by simply because of societal tradition and stuff like that, and they often have like other influences, other places they're getting information, like the internet and TV and entertainment and things like that. So I kind of saw like back home where you had people who would maybe have gone to school, whether it was here in the States or the UK or South Africa or something like that. They tended to have like more their faith was like superficial, just kind of keeping up with appearances, because they had been exposed to all these ideas. But when you come down to Malawi, it's just do as you say. Just do the stuff and keep doing, and you end up feeling like there's something just more interesting, like you said, exotic somewhere out there as well. Yeah,
and I think you're absolutely right, because I get a lot of people who tell me, well, most religious believers, they say, oh, there's an inverse relationship. The more education you get, the less chance you're going to be a believer.
Right.
But I would push back a little bit on that, because I feel, while I definitely agree with you, there are definitely some people, including some family members I have, that really feel no reason to question. They don't dig them for themselves. They say prayers and they feel like their prayers get answered sometimes, and sometimes they don't, or at least they feel like they maybe didn't answer particular prayers sometimes, when God does answer all prayers. But the thing is, I'm just saying, is a lot of them haven't really felt the need to go into it. But I did. I felt like I don't want to worship the wrong God.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to invest my life worshiping the wrong God if there's some other God out there that's the one that's the true God.
Right. Yeah. And if there is a true God, then there would be some way of knowing, having knowledge about him, and being able to intellectually engage with that God, as well as, kind of the spiritual components as well. So it lends to both sides, and it's always possible. At least I think so.
Yeah.
About Parker, maybe I don't know. I feel some different.
Parker, what do you? I know I don't think Parker's religious. I'm pretty sure Parker's an atheist.
Yeah. I would probably describe myself as an atheist. Yeah.
Have either of you guys? I just got in now. Craig Reed is this guy on Twitter, and he's been trying to promote philosophical beliefs, and he's looking at like Bernard Kastrup and all of these different beliefs. And I started listening a little bit to one of his things, and he was talking about the hard problem of consciousness, and he talked about something really strange. And I have to go back and listen again, because I'm not even sure I heard it correctly, because it was so weird. But he was talking about people who have this dissociative idea where they can share dreams. And I thought, wait a second, people can't, it's impossible that you can share dreams. And so he was bringing up some interesting stuff. So I don't know if either of you guys follow that stuff at all, or, oh yeah, sorry, Craig's in the audience. Craig, I listened to that. I don't know what to make of this idea of sharing dreams. I don't even want other people in my dreams. Like, tell them to go away. It's like, get out of my dream, man. It's my dream. I'm constructing it myself. And so, Hold on, let me get Nathan in here. Hi, Nathan.
Hey, I thought I'd join you for a bit because I'm just listening and not doing my work, and I'm going to go on a walk in a minute. So I thought I'd join.
Well, so I saw pictures of you. Now, Nathan is our good friend, Digital Gnosis, but I saw pictures of you at the zoo, Nathan.
Oh, yeah. I've escaped, so don't tell them.
Yeah, you had funny pictures. You and V were out at the zoo. You guys had some nice outside pictures.
Yeah, we just took a day off and went. It was good. V really enjoyed the giraffes. I don't know. I was sort of having hay fever, like allergy problems all day, but I still enjoyed it. But it was I was more sort of like just trying to survive.
Yeah, this time of year can be tough for a lot of people, allergy wise, and so yeah, it's a tough one. So yeah, Craig is in here saying his dream thing is just an analogy for universal consciousness, and so yeah, so oh gosh, this is just such a crazy idea. This idea that have any of you ever thought about somebody and then suddenly that person calls you or emails you like right after you thought about them?
I've had stuff like with like I would have a dream and shortly after or in the same day it would transpire with something close enough to like that. But I've never had thought about somebody that they call. That's kind of weird. I guess the dream is just as weird, strange, but yeah, not that case.
Yeah, well, I've had a dream like that too. I had this dream that this one person that was in my accounting class at Florida Atlantic was going to be my roommate at Florida State, which was a really weird dream. And I told my sister that day, I said, I had the weirdest dream. This girl who sits two rows ahead of me that I see a lot. She's got brown curly hair. I dreamed that she was going to be my roommate. And my sister's thinking, oh, that's weird. And so as I'm coming out of the classroom the next day, the girl comes up to me and she breaks open a conversation. I'd never talked to her before. Her name's Babs, and her name was Barb actually, but we called her Babs in college. But I remember she came up to me and we started talking, and she said, "I'm transferring to Florida State in the spring." Now this is spring of our sophomore year, so it's kind of unusual time to transfer. She said, "I'm transferring to Florida State," and I said, "That's so weird. I'm transferring to Florida State too." She ended up being my roommate, and she was awesome. She got me to stay grounded. She made me go to church with her.
Nice.
She didn't make me, but I felt she has a good Catholic guilting thing going on, so she kept me going to church. So that's
Nathan, are you a Christian?
I'm an agnostic Christian, so I don't really believe in any of the metaphysics or anything, but I read the Bible and go to church and stuff.
Oh, okay.
I think that's kind of new for you, Nathan, isn't it? That you're going to church now?
Yeah, I mean, it's new over the past couple of months, really. I guess we were going to Zoom church intermittently over the past year or so, but definitely after sort of leaving the evangelical church, I was not going for a good year or so at all to anything like that.
That's interesting. I just have to say, David's in the chat says Babs when was this? The 1950s? No, it wasn't the 1950s. I'm not that old, David's. But I did have friends with funny names like Babs and Binky. Those were two of my good friends. So, Binky still goes by Binky, by the way.
Was that these? So these weren't their actual names; they were nicknames, right?
They're nicknames. Yeah, Binky's real name was Mary, and Babs is really Barbara.
I didn't know if people then were just actually calling people that was the name of the person.
Yeah, no, there was. Oh, actually, I had another friend. Now that I think about it, her name was Muffin. Can't even name these. Her real name's Andrea, but I don't know how she got. Anyway, we're getting silly. I don't know why I just kept my regular name. I didn't want these other strange names. So it's funny. Yeah. So Nathan is, I think one thing I appreciate about you, I know you do a lot of these really long open mics on your channel, but you open the conversation you're listening to people. I think, you know what I mean? You're not just closed-minded saying, I'm only going to be in this one position. I will listen to other views.
Yeah. I mean, there's, it's actually an Augustine quote, but I mean, I think that at least any of the concepts of God that for me are live options would be concepts that aren't where all truth would be God's truth for the models of God that I think work. And so I can't imagine, I don't have a plausible conception of a God that would want me to sort of hold beliefs that I didn't think were true or anything like that. all the models of God that I think could possibly work would be like, even if it meant disbelieving in them, would be able to see, the kind of epistemic reasons that I'd have for adopting whatever position I came to, and would want me to hold. So if there is a God, basically, I think I'm the best thing I can do is follow the best reasons that I have. And if there isn't a God, then I also want to follow the best reasons that I have. So whichever way it is, I'm just, I'm not scared of what anyone's got to say or learning new information or anything like that, because whichever way the conclusion goes, finding out what's true and kind of thinking about these things is where I want to be, I guess.
Yeah.
Follow the truth.
Hey, Craig,
Yeah,
I want to say hi to Craig too.
Hi. Yeah, follow the truth is what I heard him just say, and whichever one turns out to be right, that he'll hopefully become more convinced by what's true than what's false, right?
Yeah, if
I think
either
that's
it's
reasonable.
if either God exists or God doesn't exist, it makes sense to follow what's true. So I'm not really scared of
Right. You had a when you were in a debate, you had like a syllogism that explained where you were prior to like, I guess if you're a kind of Christian now, that I thought was the right syllogism. I thought it was like almost a perfect encapsulation of how someone who doesn't believe should approach the subject. It was kind of like, in principle, God might exist, but I don't know that for a fact. I forget the exact details.
Yeah, I can't remember where I would have. Was it when I spoke to Gavin Hurley? When was it that one?
It was some sort of weird debate with some guy who was like it was a weird debate. You're just opening.
Oh, the Vedantic Hegelian, the Krishna guy.
Yes.
Yeah, that one.
It was a weird debate. But your syllogism was perfect for like non-belief. I thought it was a perfect encapsulation.
See if I can find it.
You put it up on Twitter.
You did a debate with Gavin, Nathan?
Like a year ago. It wasn't. It was a bit sort of strange because he was, like on his phone and cutting in and out and stuff like that. The whole time.
Oh, Gavin, the Australian.
Gavin is so funny. Gavin's from New Zealand, but he had some debate once where he was leaving a library. I think he was in.
Yeah,
and he left his camera on.
That was pretty awesome. That was Skylar. That was Skylar Fiction, I think.
Yeah, that was so funny. Then there was another debate that he had, but he stood up and he had a suit jacket on and I think he had boxers.
Oh, he would. Wow. He got caught half naked on camera.
It was just, it's fine to whatever you wear, but it's just funny. I just think he's a character. I mean, I honestly just.
I found the slides from that debate. And I think this might be what you're referring to, Craig, if you see that.
I can't see it. It's on
so
my phone.
I just put it up here.
Okay, sorry. It's just like a list of bullet points. I don't really know if there was like a syllogism that I gave or something.
It was just sort of an encapsulation of like where you were at. And it was it was like, in principle, God might exist, but I don't know. And it was almost like it was the kind of, I just thought it was the right approach because it was like, it was, I don't know, but in principle, God could exist, which is already not necessarily an atheist. It's like,
I think that's the right slide that I've got up. So I got, I don't believe in theistic metaphysics. I'm only describing my own beliefs and knowledge. In principle, God might exist.
Yes.
Someone else might know that God exists, even if I don't know. To some respect, I'm withholding judgment from whether it's true or false because I can see how both sides can rationally hold their position. And I believe some models of God and claims about the supernatural are false and should not rationally compel belief, though. So,
that's almost like in other words, that's saying like, I believe what I believe to be true, and I investigate the truth, and in principle, someone could. The part that I liked was that somebody could know that God exists, and me not know that. So
right.
It's offering a possibility of you could be wrong too, and you're going to investigate. That's what I.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because like I might not know God exists, but it doesn't mean that someone else doesn't. I mean, maybe God appeared to Abraham and Moses, right? And they
right. Exactly. It's holding out a possibility that you might have a religious experience, or somebody had a legitimate one. That's why I liked it.
You guys are reminding me. You guys are reminding me of Jordan Peterson a little bit, because it seems like Jordan Peterson lately, from the videos I've been watching, is getting closer to Christianity. I guess his wife had just overcome, I think his wife
definitely
overcame cancer or something like that. And she's a believer, I believe. I think that's what I heard. And
yeah,
so
she is very,
he just broke down, and it sounded like he was getting closer. And there's like this psychological block for him that I think he thinks he's got to be the perfect person morally to be a Christian. And so therefore he doesn't want to say necessarily that God exists, because he feels like that will require him to suddenly become this massively moral person.
Sell his food, like give to the poor, and sell his house, and like start walking the earth. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's what he thinks. And I think that that's one of the things, like Christ said, he came for the sinners. He works in the pits. Oh, we just lost our friend Limby. He must have had to go. So I'm just saying that's one of the things. Oops, my system's kind of messed up here.
You know, I'm not sure if it is that. I don't know. I can see how definitely from like an evangelical point of view because you've got that interpretation of what the gospel message is and what Christianity is, that it would seem like he's saying that. But I think from his point of view, it's like those biblical stories that have had the most effect on him are the ones where it's taking like the holiness of God seriously. So like the Old Testament stories, about like the Ark of the Covenant and stuff like that. And I think those have had a real impact for Peterson in his thinking, and he's definitely, he's alluded in his lectures to having had religious experiences on psychedelics and various things like that, where I think he's probably had some experiences where he thinks, well, that thing, if there is a God, whatever it is, it's that thing that I've had experiences of. And for him, it's, like terrifying and divine and so forth, and so and utterly other. And so I think he's just got this, I think he's actually got an appropriate reverence for him. I don't think, my point of view on Christianity is that if the Christian God exists, it doesn't really care so much about whether you have the proposition, like Jesus is God in your mind or something like that. I personally think it is. I want to say it, well, I guess works based. It's more like morality
how you
based
act towards other people.
Yeah,
that's what I heard in your essay. If God exists,
I think so.
He cares more about how you behave towards other human beings. That's what I got from your essay. I don't know if that's.
I think so. Yeah, that's definitely. That's the ethical teaching I certainly get from Jesus in the Gospels. Is this idea of the parables and things that resonate with me the most are certainly the ones that are like sort of condemning of people who are extrinsically religious, like the Pharisees and so forth.
He fought with the Pharisees, the religious order. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the right reading. I think that's spot on.
So I think in the case of Peterson, though, that actually in the place that he's in, even though he's clearly struggling with mental illness really badly. And,
yes, totally.
But I think in the place he's in,
that Vervaeke convo that you watched, that was clear.
Oh, that was really bad.
Wait, what happened? Because I didn't. Can you guys expand on that?
So John Vervaeke is a cognitive psychologist, and he's sort of trying to synthesize this philosophy that's kind of delving into religious concepts and use that for people's mental health and stuff. And he had a conversation with Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson is just clearly really mentally unwell in his interview style. Like he keeps just interrupting. He's sort of scattered and all over the place. When he starts talking, he works himself up and gets really emotional, like he's about to cry. Like clearly just something's not going.
Stressed. It's a good conversation, though. There's interesting parts about it. Ron loves it.
I really struggled with it just because of Jordan's whenever John started to articulate some of his views on something, Jordan would like go, yes, tell me, teach me, and start or pivot onto another thing. And there was something going on. It was really weird.
That was definitely there. Absolutely. The Bernardo Castrop one that I posted and tagged you to, that Stephanie Rest reference is way better, I thought. with John Vervaeke and Bernardo.
Oh
Castro.
yeah, no, I thought you meant a Jordan Peterson one. Yeah, he's not talked to him.
No, I started watching that Bernard. I haven't watched the whole thing, like you said, Craig. I was going to make a video, but I watched part of that, and it was fascinating. And I just don't.
It's really intelligent.
What did he? Because what did he say? I mean, I want to make sure I'm saying this right, but he had this thing DID, and I can't disassociative something. I forgot. I didn't catch the whole.
Yeah, that's really weird. That's an analogy that he keeps using, and nobody really understands it. He's got this postulate of universal consciousness, right? That we're sort of in a meta consciousness. Now, it's not God, but it's kind of like the universe is a universal consciousness, and we are disassociated consciousnesses within it. And his example is an analogy that he keeps bringing up from dissociative mental disorder. If you don't know him, it's really hard to pick that up. I know his stuff pretty well because I've been checking out for a few months now. But like he makes an analogy between a dissociative mental disorder where if I were a dissociative mental disorder, I'd have multiple personalities within myself. So I'm omniconscious and there are disassociated alters within me. That's what he's comparing to the universal life. It's really hard to get that from just one hearing.
I think that's still compatible with a lot of Christian readings, which would say that, you know, the ultimate end of the universe is union with God. Right.
Totally. That's why I latched on to originally. I was like, this is very Christian friendly stuff.
But yeah, I find him a bit more French. Sorry, SJ, you.
Oh, no, Susan just clarified dissociative identity disorder. That is what it was. Yeah. And he says that is a real, or she says that is a real thing. And so I didn't know exactly. See, I just listened to this. I wasn't getting the definitions of a lot of the stuff. I don't think they even defined it. So thank you. If anyone wants to define that too. It sounds like it's multiple personalities. Is that the same thing?
Yes, it's absolutely the same thing. He's just drawing an analogy. Like there's a universal consciousness. And everybody always asks him, like, why can't we know it? And he's like, we're like disassociative alters within universal consciousness, analogous to someone with dissociative personal disorder, something like that.
So when he said that 25% of the people with DID, he said they have these dreams where they're interacting with other people. He must have been talking about other personalities within their own mind.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's better because I was getting a little freaked out thinking that someone else can jump into my dreams. I was like, what?
Well, I mean, that's what his theory kind of is, in that, you know, what you're doing right now is allegedly that on his account of things.
Wow.
Yeah,
I think some of the
stream of consciousness. Go ahead.
I find some of the I find some of the lines of argumentation he uses a bit interesting, though. Like he seems to try to argue from the sciences a lot. But it seems that his metaphysical theory of idealism would be consistent with literally any empirical observation. So I'm not really sure why he uses. I think that's a bit confused in his thinking, and I'd want to ask some questions about that, because he says stuff like, you know, for example, he makes a prediction on his metaphysical view that we wouldn't be able to produce consciousness in like a silicon-based architecture, right? And it's like, well, why would you make that prediction based on idealism? That doesn't make sense to me, because idealism is just the theory that reality itself is mental appearances, and that there isn't like a material reality behind those appearances. So, I mean, you could have appearances of what we'd call silicon-based architecture that is conscious, and that would still be consistent with idealism. And then he uses evidence like from the activity in the brain, reducing, so areas like the cingulate cortex in the back of the brain.
That's actually really compelling stuff. That's
what's interesting. I agree, it's really interesting. I just don't see how it. So what he wants to say is that because the activity,
his LSD part, right, where LSD actually slows down your brain, and that's part of why it's a hallucinatory experience, because you're actually decreasing your filter. Like, we're filtering out information with our brains, and it's slowing it down. So you're tripping out on things that are kind of actually there, but you're not able to perceive.
Yeah, or not. Really it's not that they're not there. It's not that they're not there, because some of these things, I mean, from what neuroscience has to say, are actually like faulty representations, because you've got like an image representation parts of the brain. You've got a bunch of these what I might call like competing hypotheses of what an image is that different neurons are like trying to sort of sum up to so one of them, like the wood grain, for example, kind of looks like faces. Like there's a bunch of stuff like that, and they're all popping up. And then this area called the cingulate cortex in the back of the brain sort of adds up the sums, and then whichever one wins out is the image that actually gets represented. Now, in psychedelic experiences, the cingulate cortex activity is reduced, so then you get a lot more of these like false images coming up. So that's why people see like faces and like wood grains, walls, and things like that. But the question is why? I mean, so he wants to argue then because in a psychedelic experience, our conscious experience is richer. When brain activity is lower, then that means that consciousness must not be associated with brain activity. But I'm not sure why idealism would make that prediction as well. Like that seems more like a Cartesian dualistic type thing.
The one thing I'd ask you to do, because I only started using him as he got me interested in idealism. The Donald Hoffman version of idealism is a lot more parsimonious. I think it's better. And
what is it?
Check it out.
It's basically, I'm a conscious agent, and we are a vast network of interconnected conscious agents, and that's his metaconsciousness, which is just provable fact. I mean, mommy, daddy are conscious agents who taught you how to, read and write, and you watch TV produced by conscious agents. His idealism is a lot simpler. Bernardo Kastrup's has a lot of what Nathan is correct about, and he's pointing out, is there's a lot of extra theories where he draws conclusions that he has evidence for, but not necessarily enough evidence to go where he wants to go.
Right.
So they're kind of like extra things. It's not that parsimonious. That's why you should check out the Donald Hoffman one. I think it's much better. Just the idealist aspect.
Well, I'm a big fan of
sounds
oh, sorry,
fascinating.
Esther, you go. Yeah.
Oh, no, I just want to say, I think that sounds fascinating. I just want to add that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I'm actually a really big fan of a Christian Church of England bishop, George Berkeley, who he was a famous
original,
idealist.
Right? He was the original.
Well, there'd been idealists before that, but he's like the modern period idealist, sort of in the empiricist tradition. Yeah.
I want to add just a comment on Hellbound Heathen, who said these conversations go away from what the title was on. No, the title's on isms. So
isms.
Right now we're on idealism.
Yeah.
So we're being legitimate here, even though I mentioned capitalism, communism. I forgot to put idealism in there. I didn't know Craig and Nathan were going to come on, and so continue.
Well, the thing with John Vervaeke is like John Vervaeke was challenging him on his metaphysics, but the second conversation he wasn't. They were just talking about where they both have common ideas, and I thought it was a really good conversation because they both share a lot of, they're kind of similar to you, Nathan. You like a lot of what they have to say, I think.
Yeah, I struggle with John because it seems to me so his grounding is in psychology, right? And it seems like what he's trying to do is he's doing philosophy, but he's trying to do a philosophy where he reduces everything to his training in cognitive psychology. And it's kind of a bit weird for me because often the reductions that he'll make are like inconsistent with our best physics or what other philosophers have had to say about pretty core things. And so I think he would benefit. I'm not saying he isn't smart or anything, but it's like, I think he would benefit from communicating with more like mainstream philosophers when he's trying to do philosophy, and that would help chip away some of the places where I at least see him as going a bit off when I listen to him talk, because he sort of says stuff.
That's definitely he says a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
and like I always analyze that as he just talks too much and he throws out too many like 5,000 fastball concepts that are hard to parse, work your brain through. But yeah, it could be what you're saying. It's parsimonious. It's probably the same problem. He's probably going off on tangents to some degree. Definitely.
Yeah, I just want to say I saw Jeffrey Williams was in the chat here a little while ago, and I know you had a conversation with him, Craig, and so
yeah, that was a good conversation. Was that the actual Jeffrey Williams?
Yeah, it was, because then he started talking about his philosophy degree.
Yes.
So it was definitely him. He said, "Is there any other Jeffrey Williams?" Because I asked if it's him.
That's funny.
That's good. So and Nathan, what you said you are going to earn you're earning a master's degree. I don't know if I caught what you're earning it in.
Well, I'm looking at one next year. I've actually accepted an offer to do computational neuroscience right now, but I'm still between that and philosophy, to be honest. I mean, I definitely prefer philosophy. It's just whether it makes sense to make that decision.
You have to look at, like, I would just say the simple way. Now, Jeff, he was in here saying that he got a very good career for 30 years as a consultant. He's a philosophy major and he had a consulting degree. And so I just said my major thing with that is just make sure you've got job prospects for whatever degree
I'm already employable because, I've been working 5 years in the workforce, right? I was working full time all throughout my degree and, getting multiple, like, at least interview requests and things through LinkedIn like every day, which is quite frustrating.
Wow, that's great.
But yeah, like the problem just is that I find software development really boring. That's it's quite. I am in a privileged position compared to some people, so I should probably work that out a bit more. But I'm just so like burnt out from it. Just like making random bits of code do stuff that I don't care about. Like,
I wouldn't do it if you, because I see that just reminds me years ago. One of the things that comes very easy to me is accounting. And so I remember thinking that I was going to follow a bunch of family footsteps because in my family, at my dad's side, there's a ton of accountants and my grandmother, all these people were accountants. And so I thought about going into it and I started looking at taking additional accounting classes. And I just started thinking, why would I want to do this to myself? Spreadsheets? No. So I had to get out of it. And so I think I would have right now, if I'd been doing this now for 20, 30 years of accounting, I don't know, I'd be very miserable.
Yeah, I'm sort of thinking something similar, like extrapolating from what I've been doing, the past few years into the future. So I think, I don't know, I don't know where I'll sort of end up, but I'm definitely really interested in these ideas. So if I could somehow integrate that into my life, that'd be great for me.
So Zheng Fukusheng says that you could be the next Sam Harris. Is this true?
I disagree. I don't have as like a soporific a voice like as Sam Harris does, and also I understand too much moral philosophy. So,
actually, that's Craig. You said that Sam Harris was kind of put in his place by Bernardo Kastrup, right?
Oh, I said he would be if they debated.
Oh, he would be.
Yeah, because Bernardo Kastrup. I mean, Nathan doesn't seem to esteem him as highly as I do, but in terms of like a pointy head, I think he would. I don't think Sam Harris would. I think he was really mad at Sam Harris and challenging him to a debate on Twitter. And I was saying in my video, like, if that debate should ever happen, I don't think Sam Harris would be able to put 7 points on the board against him. Like Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson, those are cool debates. And part of why that was kind of revolutionary for apologetics was that's the first time you saw the Christian side easily hold his own with what is considered to be like a real, as Nathan points out, I don't think he's a real first-rate intellect either, but what's considered to be a first-rate intellect of the atheist community. And Jordan Peterson easily held his own with him, but I think Bernardo Kastrup would crush Jordan Peterson. Sam Harris. Like I don't see Sam Harris being able to do anything with him because it's really thoroughly thought out. I mean, Nathan's right that there are weird parts to it, but he's grounded it in his own thing really thoroughly.
Yeah, I noticed he was talking a lot about Carl Jung and about just other philosophers.
His analysis of Jungian metaphysics, like I was posting that video, just that alone, where he was on some sideshow talking about Jungian metaphysics, was awesome, and his analysis of Schopenhauer is awesome. Like there are things that he does really thoroughly and really well, and that's why he was so mad at Sam Harris. He's like, I can't even believe this person calls himself a public intellectual because he's such a joke. And he was like, because he was misrepresenting idealism. And I was like, Sam Harris would be crushed by it. That's how I see it. That's how I see that going down.
Well, I'll tell you who has. So there's a guy who I really like who's got a philosophy YouTube channel called Kane B, and he's I think he's got his PhD in philosophy now. And this other woman who teaches philosophy somewhere called Cole Nasrallah, they did a really good episode critiquing Sam Harris's moral philosophy, and I actually think I shared it with Rationality Rules, and he went and reached out to Kane B and went on and did a conversation with them, and then subsequently made a video against like this. I think I'm not putting this all down to like me sharing this video or anything, but he's recently changed his views on a ton of positions and got way more into the philosophy and stuff.
He's getting a lot better. Like he had that sit down with Jonathan Pajot. Like that's a sign that he's like, you know.
Well, the recent video with Joe Schmidt was really good as well. His Kalam video.
I didn't see that. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, it was really good.
Is Joe Schmidt? He's that young atheist kid, right?
Agnostic.
Agnostic. Okay.
Yeah. Or fake Catholic. His parents are Catholic actually, and he's not told them yet that he's like publishing papers against like the best Catholic philosophers in the world, and his parents are Catholics, and he hasn't like told them yet that he's
oh wow.
No, yeah.
Yeah, I mispronounce. I say Jung. I have a habit of just doing that. I know it's Young. I hear people talk about Young all the time. Sorry, Hellbound. So he just came in the chat, and also I noticed that you said that. So sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. No, I think first of all, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah,
okay, good. Yeah. No, somebody else pointed that out too. No, I listened to this one YouTube channel, and they kept mispronouncing the name.
Yeah, no, that's my bad. I know it's Young,
funny.
and I do it anyway because I visualize. I don't know, just the way I think and I write. I visualize stuff, and I tend to. I have pronunciation issues sometimes.
Oh, well, I mispronounce things incorrectly all the time, so I really can't talk.
No, it's all good. So yeah, so you pointed out, Hellbound. So welcome to the chat. You pointed out that we've changed the conversation. So we've switched.
Yeah, that
moving
happens
different
in every
isms.
hangout, though.
Yeah, it does.
You know,
well,
you
we
put
tend
the
to
title
focus
in
on
there.
whatever the people who get in here want to talk about.
Right, exactly, because conversations just naturally, you know, change and go in different directions. People bring up different points or whatever. But I think it's a great conversation to have. I don't know exactly where you left off on any of it, like individualism or any of that.
Yeah, well, I just wanted to make sure people know what that is, because a lot of times people think individualism is a bad thing. And I think it's one of the best possible things that the United States has going for it, actually.
Mm-hmm. No, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I like it because it goes in with individual rights, property rights, creativity, entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it seems like right now everybody wants to throw people into a box. Like, oh, okay, well, you have this belief, so you're automatically right wing, or oh, you have this, so you must be left wing. And no, individuals have various different beliefs. I've met many people who call themselves more like a centrist because they agree with some things on quote unquote the left, and then agree with some things quote unquote on the right, and then they disagree with many things. And I think it's really destructive, in my opinion, to just cast people into a particular box for whatever reason, because each individual is an individual, and they all hold individual beliefs. And I think that to cast somebody into a box there where they don't exactly fit is destructive. That's my opinion.
I totally agree with you, because I don't fit the Republican or the Democrat side, for example. Exactly. Yeah. And I don't like it when people assume. In fact, I get that on Twitter from I have a handful of atheists who follow my protected account. And this one guy was like, you must believe this and this and this because you're a Christian. I'm like, no, I never said that. And you just totally box me in with these other people, this little caricature that you've built of Christians.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a lot of respect for you, SJ, and I have respect for a lot of other Christians too. And many of those Christians that I maybe have less respect for, they tend to do that. They go, oh, well, you're a pagan, so you must automatically believe all of this, or oh, you're a Hindu, you must automatically believe all of this. And it doesn't really further any kind of conversation, right, because
so I'm going to have to head off. Sorry.
Okay.
But thank you, SJ, Hellbound.
Great seeing you.
All right, Nathan.
You too. Sorry to interrupt that, but bye.
Great seeing you.
Yeah, totally. So I mean, it's just kind of it really limits somebody once you kind of like it's almost like cutting them off. It's kind of like, oh, well, you're this way, so it's almost like they cut you off.
Exactly
from that
what
point.
You're trying to do. You're trying to not engage with the person at all, and like
Exactly.
write them off without even talking to them. Oh, you
Exactly, Craig.
these people who believe this. Yeah, no doubt.
Well, you do have, I mean, I have to, on the other hand, just to point something out, people like to do cognitive shortcuts. And for them, if you can just stereotype people to fit into a certain mold, it just makes it easier on their mind.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
It's
sometimes
easy
you're
for
right,
them.
too. I mean,
Sometimes they are right.
You know, I think heathen here is like somewhat of a centrist or even maybe center right, which is anomalous to other atheists, right? I don't even know if you're an atheist. Are you an atheist or an agnostic?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm more agnostic than I am atheist, but I'm also kind of moving away from that because I'm finding I was kind of in this sort of atheist group for quite a while, but I'm finding that I really don't want to be associated with them. I feel that they're kind of, I feel like they're the equivalent of what some Christians extremists become.
Thank you.
And they're like atheist extremists.
Totally.
So they're kind of, they're shooting themselves in the foot. If you don't believe in God, that's fine. And if you do believe in God, that's fine, in my opinion. And I don't think it's good to like pummel people with your beliefs, whatever they may be. And that, I feel like that happens. Not all atheists, and I'm not labeling all atheists that way, but some of them.
The ideologue is the one who, when you're in a conversation with them, like notice there's three of us who believe different things and nobody's trying to impose their beliefs on the other person. Mm-hmm. That's the ideologue. And that can be an atheist too, you know, or a Christian who's like, well, you know, you better accept Jesus now, you know. Mm-hmm. So it can be either type of person can be the ideologue. And there are a lot of atheists like that for sure.
Yeah, and there's a lot of atheists and agnostics online that, you know, that's just who they are, and they're not out to go and try and change people's minds, you know. I think that that's ultimately what it is. If you're out there and you're active, you're trying to force your particular worldview or your particular beliefs or your whatever, your opinion, you're trying to force it on other people. I think that's where you begin to cross the line.
Yep.
You know.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, well, I think we don't see. I have to say, I think as far as the atheists are concerned, I've only met a couple in real life. I'll be completely open about that. I've only met a couple, and that's not even in the recent times. But I can say that the ones who aren't online seem different to me than the ones who are online seem. The anti-theist. Let me clarify. Not the atheist necessarily. The anti-theist, like Aaron Ra, and that's a whole different league.
There's a whole culture of. I separate them as debate me bros and philosophical atheists. Like philosophical atheists are cool and honest actors, and they're interested in philosophy of religion. And then the debate me bros are like they'll roll up on you to basically put you down and try and have a debate and basically put you down is what they're trying to do. You know, that's the online ones. That's a culture. That's
Yeah, and I agree with you, SJ. I think it is more the anti-theist. And now, you know, I mean, I got into a couple of conversations with somebody maybe a year ago, and I never got a clear definition of what they believed anti-theist was and what the definition of anti-theist was. It seemed like people had different opinions about it. But yeah, I agree with you. Anti-theists are, they seem to be kind of like the ones that are like, well, my position is the best, so you should hold my position. It's like, well, I don't understand why your position is best.
I hate religion, all religions, all the time. Hate.
I got into a. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say some of them. I have to give some of them credit. Okay, so here's what I want to say. I think that there are some people in the Christian faith, in the Christian community, who can drive other people away, especially those who are they're really the Pharisees of our time. There are people who are living in hypocritical ways, really hypocritical ways, who are pretending on the outside they're Christian and on the inside they're going around doing things against other people in horrific ways. There's those kind of people. There are people who are yelling fire and brimstone at everybody and that kind of thing. And so I think sometimes they drive their own children and their families away. And then unfortunately, some of those former fundamentalist Christian family groups or whatever, like Apologia and who else? I mean, a lot of these people say they came from these fundamentalist families and that Ken Ham drove them away and all that kind of stuff. And they stay fundamentalist to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know if apologists, I can't say apologists stay fundamental, but I mean, I'm just saying some seem to be fundamentalist types in atheism.
Yeah, they keep the same type of binary thinking: good, bad, right, wrong, black, white. If you're atheist, you're good. Christian, bad. They just reverse the paradigm, but it's the same type of tribal, like, not all of them, but that's the ones who transfer directly from fundamentalist Christianity haven't necessarily stopped thinking in fundamentalist ways. Like even Aaron Ross says when he reads something like the Bhagavad Gita, if I find one error in it, and I'm like, who on earth reads a Bhagavad Gita as it's inerrant? Like who even thinks like that except a fundamentalist Christian? You check out other ideas and other people's worldviews, and you try and understand where they're coming from. You're not trying to. I don't know. To me, there was just a natural way of interacting with people. How I grew up, that it's like how we're talking right now is normal. And,
Exactly. I don't mind engaging people in conversation, but the minute somebody's rude to me, that's it. I'm not going to put up with it because there's no reason to. I got into a discussion with an atheist a while ago, and he was just rude. That's all he was, and he kept repeating the same thing over and over again. So I kept repeating the same thing over and over again, and eventually I just left the conversation because I realized it was not going to go anywhere. The guy was borderline a bigot. He really has a twisted opinion of anybody who holds a belief that can't be, that can't be tested and proved, and whatever arbitrary, well, they're not arbitrary, but whatever guidelines they think that they should that they think is true and pure for their acceptance of somebody's belief or opinion.
Yeah, that I have to say that's one of the things that kind of drives me crazy. Like a person, and I don't mean to be picking on Aaron Roth so much today, but I just think about when he goes and debates people.
It's the perfect target because he's big enough and he's not here. He's not going to be listening, and he's kind of the paradigmatic example of the negative type of trend. So we can use him as our.
Sorry, Aaron Ra, you're a punching bag.
No disrespect, Aaron Ra, but you're doing everything wrong, and here's why.
But what he does is he'll say that he goes into a debate and he comes up with this idea with pistis, and this is this idea of faith, and he claims that Christians have faith that's unfounded. It's just faith without any sort of reason or with anything like that. And all throughout the Bible, it says different things that we're supposed to check our beliefs. We're supposed to study. I mean, we're supposed to try to gain knowledge and wisdom through Christ and all this sort of stuff. And so this idea that we believe without any sort of reasons, anything that's reasonable or that we apply no skepticism to our beliefs is ludicrous. And he's been corrected numerous times, and he just doesn't, he keeps saying it. It's just so annoying.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I think that was one of the arguments that I had with this particular person that I got into a conversation with, is because they believe, that anybody who holds a belief, like if you hold a belief in a monotheistic deity, you have no basis for it. Like it's just like you're just living in a fantasy world. There's nothing to support your position whatsoever, and that's not true. If I talked to you, SJ, and I said, okay, well, what led you to your particular faith? You would give me reasons, and they would be reasons that were acceptable to you. Like you may have had a personal experience that drove you, or you may have had a vision, or you may have had a conversation, or something may have happened, but you have a basis for your belief. Nobody just throws on a belief as a mantle and, walks around. I don't know, maybe some people do, but
some people do with Christianity because they were raised in it and they have a really dumb form of Christianity. But Stephanie and I became Christians later in life. So obviously, if we're reasonable human beings, and you can talk to us for, that's why they always try to present Stephanie as Attila the Hun, because if she's a reasonable human being, then you have to kind of come to an equation. Like, if she's a reasonable person and she can believe Christianity, there's got to be some sort of reasonable way that you could believe in Christianity, because 2 + 2
Anita the Hun.
Right, Anita the Hun. That's, oh my God, I'm using that. Dude,
that is so hilarious.
Anita the Hun. Stephanie, you're going to be Anita the Hun.
No, I forgot what they called me. They used to have a nickname for me just because they said I was Genocide Glenda because I justify. Yeah, so I said what God did in the Old Testament. God had morally sufficient reasons for his actions. I mean, we're not supposed. I mean, who are we to sit down here in our little corner of the earth and make any judgments about our Creator? I just don't see that as reasonable myself. But
yeah, well, I actually remember that debate, and that was hilarious. I hope you're not offended, SJ, but I mean, I found that comment to be really funny. But
well, I'll admit I took some of the stuff I said in that debate. If that's the one I'm thinking of, it came from who?
It was the one with Skylar Fiction.
Yeah, it came from Frank Turek. It's Frank Turek is the one that said something like God just changes locations, and I don't care. I like that. I mean, I'm fine with that. They hate me for that. You can't just say God changes locations. Well, if you're a Christian, you believe there's an afterlife, you believe in heaven and it's eternal. Then this life is just this short little temporary stepping stone. And so, I mean, that's just our beliefs. It's really fundamental to, and I don't have, by the way, I want to say something really quickly. Jamie Russell said, I am a fundamentalist here. And so I know that there are a lot of young earth creationists and fundamentalists who follow my channel. And you guys, please keep following. I think it's great to see you here. Welcome. And your beliefs, a lot of times, a lot of fundamentalist beliefs, like CJ's another one, and I get Sal in here sometimes. A lot of your beliefs, you're a very faithful person to Jesus, and you go the way that you feel that you're being directed. So
that's the key with CJ. And Sal, I've talked to. CJ is a good guy. He's not. I mean, if he defends his beliefs, as far as I've seen, I don't watch that many of his debates, but he's not in people's faces being hateful and strident, right? As far as I can tell. I don't know him that well, but he strikes me as a good guy.
Yeah, I think CJ's a great guy. So I don't know if Hellbound is aware of him or anything either.
What Hellbound is saying is CJ's allowed to believe whatever he wants. Just don't be a jerk to Hellbound. You know.
Well, I mean, everybody has different beliefs. I mean,
right.
You know, you talk to people, you're going to find out they have different beliefs, even people you think completely align with you. But you know, yeah, I mean, when it gets to young Earth creationists, flat Earth, stuff like that, yeah, there's no reason. There's no
anytime soon. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe it. I mean, I don't believe in the Christian God, but that's not my, it's not my path. So just because I don't believe it doesn't mean that, I mean, I don't know. It's just not my. I try to be tolerant in that sense, but when it comes to things that maybe affect overall society, like let's say vaccine denial, wanting to teach fundamentalist, what's it called, the young Earth creation in public school. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we need to draw a line. And from personal experience, I wouldn't want paganism being taught in schools. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want it being taught as like, this is the way that the world was created according to whatever particular mythology that person believes, because it's not part of the scientific, it's not part of that world, and we need to understand that.
It's not part of the 4 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm kind of cool with that, drawing boundaries on what's acceptable for within.
I think that brings us into some of the stuff, and I don't want to, but some of the stuff that we are seeing imposed in the schools, though, is not necessarily in line with what's good or a good thing to teach. Like, for example, trying to force people to say that all white people are just horrible and racist and everything like that. I'm sorry, I just don't agree with that, and I don't think it's right to teach that.
Yeah, well, yeah, CRT, or critical race theory, is definitely something that from what I understand of it, I'm opposed to it also. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think you should put a person in a position to say that you are living constantly under the thumb of X, and you, X, are the oppressor always, no matter what. And that's essentially what it's become. Everybody can be a bigot. Everybody can discriminate, and everybody can be racist, sexist, etc. Just because you grew up with a certain amount of melanin in your skin doesn't automatically make you a certain way. It's just that's ridiculous. That's how we how we perceived other cultures. Like, oh, that culture is inferior because of X. It's the same thing. It's just labeled differently. So yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, totally. It's the same problem, but just on the other side. They're trying to impose an ideology. It's not a fact-based ideology, but it's an ideology. You know, it's associated with the left and woke, but it shouldn't even, you know, normal left-wing people shouldn't even want that associated with them because it's toxic to a certain degree. You know, there are legitimate, I'm not necessarily leftist, but there are legitimate left-wing cases to be made for, you know, some aspects of, but wokeism, most of that woke stuff is like critical race theory is toxic. The only things I've heard about it, the only parts I know, I don't know it all that well, but it seems destructive and it's ideologically based. So.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. I think that's something that kind of disturbs me because here we are, we all kind of have an idea of what it is, but we don't know exactly what it is, and yet it's already being taught in some schools, not all schools, but some schools, and it's kind of like they should have educated the public on it first, and then you know, have some kind of a committee or something from the educational school board or somebody to say, okay, is this something that we should?
With like some conservatives, a neutral body that discusses this ideology that they're teaching to our kids and analyze it and debate it and say, is this what we want taught to our kids? Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly.
Agreed.
Yeah, and parents should have been involved in that, and they should be involved in it.
And parents are pissed right now. You see those new parents are mad. I'd be mad.
Hey, I want to say, let me just say hi here to P. Mars. P. Mars just came in.
Is in the chat. Hi.
Cool. P. Mars, I don't know, you're on mute.
I was just listening. I guess I don't know. I kind of disagree a little bit with what Hellbound is saying because, like, I think we should always be able to question things, like whether it's vaccines or the flat Earth or whatever, and it you know, if someone's wrong, I like the quote by William Blake. He says, "A fool who persists in his folly will become wise," and I don't think like anyone should be the arbiter of truth. Like, we live in a world that's like it's wall-to-wall propaganda. The ruler of this world deceives us. It's hard to know like what information to trust and what. So I don't know. I don't think it really matters what people believe or what they teach in schools. Like I don't know. The education system, I think, is also a tool of propaganda, and it's been like that for years, and it's been used to dumb people down and indoctrinate them. So don't really care what they do in schools. It's like already being used for evil in my opinion.
But I think it's a big, here's why I think a lot of this is really, really important for what they're doing in schools is because they're purposely trying to shape young minds who are going to be our future leaders. And so if they go in there and they start positing, for example, that communism is a good thing. Now I had Parker in here who's 17 years old who seems to think that communism just hasn't played out well in history, but it really is a good thing. Like Marxism really is a good thing. If you think that and you don't pay attention to what happened in history and the schools aren't telling you what happened, like the schools, I look at what my kids are learning right now. They know all about the Holocaust because Jewish people have done a very good job at getting into the high levels of society in the media and in government and in educational systems to educate people on the horrors of the Holocaust. But my kids are not being taught what went on by Mao Zedong in the middle of 1950s in China. They're not being taught what went on in USSR, Solzhenitsyn kind of things. And they're not being taught that anything on Native Americans. I just had a guy on my channel as a Native American. We're given a whole script that's definitely white focused and whitewashed in some ways as far as Native Americans. And that's something that I think needs to get out. Now, I mean, it's flipping on the other side there. Here's I'm looking at they have been oppressed, truly. And so I'm just throwing that out there. I think we have a different view of our history that doesn't take into account that we talk about Columbus discovering America, and there were already around millions of Native Americans living here when he encountered America. So anyway, that's sorry to get on my soapbox, but I had to do that.
Yeah, I caught some of that discussion. I was kind of listening to it in the background. Yeah, it was good to hear that. Yeah, P. Mars, I hope you understand that I was not for teaching flat Earth or for people to be against vaccines. So
yeah, you were against those positions, but I think, well, I think the anti-vax is the correct position. Like it's horror. I think it's the whole vaccine thing. I think is horrible. Like, would you let Hitler or Stalin vaccinate your child or you? I mean, I don't trust them.
well, I think that okay, so let me clear this up and try to talk about it in a way that won't get SJ's channel torn down. But for example, polio vaccine has saved who knows how many lives, thousands.
That's not true.
Hmm?
That's not true. What they did was there's other diseases that have similar symptoms to polio. Like one of them is Guillain-Barré, and so all they would do is they would just, if you had polio symptoms, they would say instead of having polio, you had Guillain-Barré, or there's another disease too. And so they manipulate statistics and they create this like illusion that the polio vaccine is effective, but really they're just diagnosing people with a different disease. So I don't trust all that propaganda and that iron lung propaganda. Like you can't believe.
I deal with a lot of conspiracies on my channel, mostly related to the occult and some other things, but there's a fine line between believing every single conspiracy in the entire world and then being skeptical about some of these conspiracies that are around. So I think that if you're going to assume that everything is propaganda and everything is some kind of deception by Satan or Jesuits or whatever it is that you particularly believe, you're doing yourself a disservice, because what you're doing is you're not accepting knowledge. You're not accepting what people have learned. You're not accepting what has been passed down to you from, generations of people who've gone out and done the work, in particular around, like, say, vaccines and a flat earth.
Well, what's the difference between information and propaganda?
I want to point out, instead of propaganda, obviously the rabies vaccine does work, right?
We're getting
Sorry to interrupt.
Are you a doctor? Are you here for your?
Am I a doctor?
Your medical expert opinion?
Well, all you really need
Bruce,
is a
the expert
veterinarian.
here.
Excuse me. All you need is a veterinarian, and I think it's pretty obvious rabies vaccines work. Are you going to argue that?
I wasn't talking about rabies vaccines.
Well, you're talking about vaccines. I was just mentioning it's obvious that certain vaccines do work.
Well, let's just because I think let's get away from vaccines right now, because I don't want to this channel get knocked off for that kind of thing. That's exactly the way they. So let me just actually, Bruce, have you been on my channel before?
A long time ago. A long time ago. I think it was 6 months ago or something like that. It's been a good while.
Yeah, welcome. Oh, we just lost Craig. Craig must have had to go. So somebody said he liked Craig's monologues, or she liked Craig's monologues. So wherever that, Cafe said that. So Craig, I just want to say, a huge fan of your monologues. So there we go. So listen, you guys, I know we're actually getting towards coming up on 2 hours here. So I wanted to see if maybe we could go around and just share a little bit about yourself and maybe tell people how they can find you. And if you want to make some parting thoughts on any of these topics that we've covered, feel free. That'd be great.
I'll just start off by saying hello to everyone, and sorry I'm late. My channel is just a mess. It's just arguing and fighting over people, treating people badly in the name of Christ, and all kinds of horrible things. So I don't really promote my channel. I'm sorry, I don't.
No worries. What do you get? You bring a lot of non-believers into?
No, I usually try to talk with people who claim to be believers that are particularly rough on people and cussing them out, calling them horrible names and that kind of thing, proclaiming Christ. And I don't know, I just feel driven. I've been driven to do that for years. So I don't know. So that's why I don't really promote my channel, generally speaking.
Okay.
It's not a nice place.
It's a harsh place.
Well,
brave new world over there.
Right, because you're addressing people who act like that. And actually, some of them are even growing right now. It's becoming even more popular. And that's, I think it's a shame. It's a shame to see people doing that. I don't know what it's about, but if people like it, I guess.
I have seen, actually, there are a handful of Christian channels that I've noticed lately are starting to fight with each other. And I kind of agree with C.S. Lewis on this. I don't think it's a good position to get in with a bunch of, they just start fighting your fellow Christians, even if, but on the other hand, if some are doing things that are like you're saying, they're Pharisee, is what I would call Pharisee Christians. I don't think that's not a good scene either.
Right. I mean, you can get to the point where you're calling out heresies, but when you're calling people, I mean, not to be obnoxious, just to give you an idea, I mean, calling women whores and sluts and bitches and this kind of thing, and then saying that you're in Christ and you're following Christ, and this kind of terminology to me, they say, well, we're just calling them out biblically, because it's like, well, no, I mean, you can't call people things like this and not expect them to, especially if it's a woman, because obviously she's going to take it that way. And
there's harsh language all throughout the Bible.
And horrible people. I'm sorry, what's that, P-Mars?
There's harsh. Jesus uses harsh language. The apostles use harsh language. What are you talking about?
Pharisees.
This is
not. I know
not.
You're pick up for this because you want to defend the guy, and those.
This is a worldly standard. This isn't a biblical standard.
I'm not
Get out of here with your worldly values.
No, you know what? I can tell you this. I mean, if I wanted to be Christ-like and live like the Holy Spirit was in me, even secular people can do that, But I think that Christians, that's just my opinion. I don't want to get too much into it. So anyhow, that's like I explained. That's why I don't usually push it is a lot of mess. And PMARs used to come in now and then. Once in a while, I'll kick them out for typing in nasty stuff in the chat.
No, you kick me out because you disagree with me. And then I type nasty stuff in the chat because I'm defiant versus tyranny.
I like S.J. Thomason seems like a nice lady. She just
you're such a bullshit artist, Bruce.
No,
wait, guys,
you can't type the N-word and stuff in my chat, and no, you can't. I'm not going to allow it.
Well, let's go. And Bruce, do you want to name your channel?
Nah. Well, I'll just say I'll make a quick hi in the side chat.
Okay.
It's a disaster in there.
Disaster. Well, it sounds like an interesting disaster. So Hellbound, how can people find? I know I can find you on Twitter. Why don't you follow my account? Because I forgot where you are.
I got removed from Twitter. I got kicked off Twitter because I made a stupid joke and Twitter took it wrong and they banned my account. So I'm off.
Really?
Twitter. Yeah.
Wow.
And I consider it a blessing. So I'm not going to bother going back onto Twitter or try to get on it because it was just a cesspool. I mean, it was great to have access to that information and be able to promote my channel on Twitter, but other than that, it's just a cesspool. You have all these people who are on the left. They're organizing for extremist behavior to cause damage, to attempt murder, and none of these people ever get kicked off Twitter. But if you make some kind of a stupid joke and you're not part of this extreme left echo chamber, they just kick you off. But they still allow terrorist extremists to organize on Twitter and without any repercussions. But anyhow, I'll get off that. So yes.
No, well, I have to agree with you to some extent. I look at some of the Iranian officials who are somehow still on Twitter saying things like completely coming after the United States. And I think to myself, okay, they're going to allow that president to say something really bad, and then they ban our president, sitting U.S. president. I mean,
I'm thinking of Antifa organizations that organize on Twitter. They organize on Twitter to assault people. They organize and made death threats against Andy No online on Twitter and never get banned. It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous that somebody like Andy No can receive death threats constantly, and none of these people ever get removed from Twitter. So anyhow,
they beat him up.
I agree with you.
I think he appears in Portland and Seattle. They beat that guy up.
Yeah, they beat him up. They threatened his life. They spray paint. They assaulted his, or they did. Well, actually, I don't know about that, but I know that they assaulted him. It's terrible. But they make death threats all the time, and they never ever get banned from Twitter. So anyhow, that's frustrating. But yeah, my channel is it's Hellbound Heathen, so you can find it that way. It's mostly occult themed. What I do is there's a lot of misconceptions about occultists, witches, and pagans out there, and so I try to correct a lot of those misconceptions and give, the actual quote that is, for example, that Aleister Crowley or MacGregor Mathers or any of these other famous occultists say, and just show the evidence. I give the audience the evidence and say, look, this is the truth. This is what this person is saying about this is incorrect. And that's how I perceive it. And some of the videos are just like, they have like music intros that people might enjoy. But anyhow, it's kind of a very focused channel. But if anybody's interested, I haven't been very active lately on it. But yeah, you can check it out if you want. I'm trying to get more into online discussions like hangouts like this, and I'm trying to get out there and talk with people and approach it from a different perspective, because I think that right now we need more communication. Even if we disagree with each other, we need to be respectful and understand somebody's point of view from their position, not from our position, but from their position. And you might come to a certain point where you don't agree on anything, and that's fine, but at least have that dialogue, have that communication, because we need to understand that when everything is taken away, we're human beings, period. We're all human beings. And if we can find some kind of a common ground, I think that that's what we need to do.
Good. Yeah, I agree with you. Finding a common ground is really important. I don't necessarily say that toleration is a good thing necessarily. It depends on what we're forced to tolerate. So I just want to throw that out there. You disagree? No, I like the idea of understanding other people's views, and I actually think it's a good idea to study other people's views. I decided I was going to try to read up on, like lately, I would just be even having Phil Fox on my channel to really understand Native American views. I don't know anything about Native American views from his that he would have from his perspective, and so now I've decided to read the materials that he shared. And so I think it's really important I do think it's important to understand people, but I don't think we necessarily need to tolerate bad ideas. Like I don't think we need to tolerate what's going on with the groups who are harassing other people, like you mentioned already with Twitter. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think tolerance and acceptance are two different things. Like there are things that obviously we shouldn't tolerate. But
like what with Andy No. I mean I know, yeah. So NGO, if you guys want to look up Andy No.
Yeah.
So great. Well, you guys, thank you so much for coming in today. You guys, please go like, subscribe, and come again. Bruce, did you want to say something else? I just saw your mic go off.
Oh no, it was interesting. No, it would have been. I'm glad we got to talk about what we did. And I'm sorry I used harsh language to express. And unfortunately, sometimes it's worse. But I don't know how else to express what I'm seeing unless I actually, it's kind of tough. But I don't know why some Christians are accepting it and even promoting it, and they seem to get a high off it. They enjoy it. I don't know what. I've seen it. I've been around probably 10 or 12 years on YouTube, so I've seen some. And I'm no perfect saint either, believe me. I've been pretty secular, different things, different times. But I've done some bizarre stuff messing around with these guys, clowning around. But what I've seen there lately, in the last 6 months to a year, it's been unreal, and so I don't know. I mean, just say like somebody's oneness, or they don't believe the Trinity the way another person does, or they believe this way or that way. Next thing you know, they're being called all these horrible names and cussed out and everything else. And it's weird. It's a very strange atmosphere, and that yet they present themselves as being godly, and yet amazingly, people are just going right along with it.
Yeah, I actually think I might know who some of those people you're talking about, but I don't want to name their names.
Yeah, well, it's only getting worse. So. I mean, it's a shame.
Yeah.
Actually, I will just say this
cut out.
That guy's
Okay.
educated.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Let me just finish this real quick. The guy is educated. He's not a dumb guy. It's a darn shame that he's run up his own ministry. But like, maybe that is where his heart's at. I don't know what's wrong. But amazingly, people are following and going right with it. It's a real sad thing to me.
All right, I'm going to cut out. Thank you so much, SJ.
Okay.
Bruce, it was nice chatting with you. And okay, take care.
Great.
Yeah,
Well,
I'll
thank
go
you.
too. I won't be
you guys-
around anymore. Thank you
Okay.
very much. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, you guys. So just remember, whether you eat, drink, or whatever you do, do it all in the glory of God. So I'm ending the broadcast. And so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Please do plan to come back. I'm going to try to do more of these. I've got a very busy couple of weeks coming up, including my son's basketball AAU tournaments. He's got a bunch of these coming up. I mean, those things are all day affairs. And so I hope to be able to get back here soon, and I hope to plan some good stuff. And I will talk to you guys soon. Have a great day. God bless you.